Royalty traditionally embodies authority and heritage. However, for certain rulers, their legacy is tainted by an act of sheer, indisputable foolishness. We aren't referring to grand warfare. Instead, think of monarchs felled by doorways, popes outwitted by pesky flies, and emperors who literally burst apart at their own funerals. Welcome to history's gallery of blunders. 33 monarchs who demonstrate that wearing a crown doesn't guarantee protection from a truly foolish demise. Our journey begins with an ending that could be described as literally explosive. William the Conqueror, the relentless duke who claimed England was worthy of a legendary farewell. Instead, he received a comedic disaster. After sustaining a fatal internal injury, preparations began for an elaborate funeral. The sole hitch was, it happened to be a scorching summer, and the funeral was postponed. His body started to ferment, resembling a human pressure cooker. When the moment arrived to place him in his custom-designed stone tomb, attendants encountered a significant dilemma. Kindly like, subscribe to the channel, and comment on where you are tuning in from. The Conqueror had expanded in size. With considerable effort, they attempted to fit him inside. However, the laws of physics cannot be disregarded. The mounting pressure caused his abdomen to rupture, releasing a biological cloud of such catastrophic odor that even the most composed priests and nobles fled the chapel, choking for fresh air. His last conquest was over the sense of smell of his own people. Next, a king often faces a myriad of adversaries, neighboring nations, treacherous kin, ambitious assassins. Rarely, however, does this list include lifeless objects. Yet King Charles VII of France met his demise in a heroically one-sided showdown with a doorframe. While eagerly making his way to observe a royal tennis match, the king was so engrossed in conversation that he overlooked a low stone lintel. He collided with it, resulting in a resounding thud. But in an act of pure alpha male resilience, he dismissed it as inconsequential. He went ahead to watch the entire match, likely critiquing the player's performance before he unexpectedly collapsed hours later and succumbed to a subdural hematoma. In the annals of French warfare, this is documented as a unique and disgraceful defeat. Final tally: architecture 1, monarchy 0. Third, the expression dying of laughter is typically metaphorical. For King Martin of Aragon, it was unfortunately a literal cause of death, delivered in a devastating 1-2 punch of overindulgence and humor. The evening kicked off with a monumental act of gluttony, as the king consumed an entire goose on his own, resulting in a severe case of indigestion. As he lay lamenting in bed, his favorite court jester entered and shared a joke. We can only conjecture what this comedic masterpiece was, but it sent the king into a wild, uncontrollable bout of laughter. The sheer force of his hilarity, combined with his already troubled digestive system, became utterly overwhelming. He literally laughed his final breath, earning a permanent entry in the annals of medical and comedic lore. Fourth, there's a distinct element of poetic justice when an individual is undone by their greatest passion. King James II of Scotland was a 15th-century technology aficionado, particularly fond of massive, formidable cannons. His enthusiasm for his artillery collection led him to use one of his prized machines, a gigantic cannon nicknamed the Lion, to besiege Roxborough Castle. To celebrate a minor victory, he gathered everyone to witness him fire this imposing weapon. Standing perilously close, filled with pride, he gave the command. Unfortunately, the cannon, notorious for its questionable craftsmanship, exploded with the force of a bomb, sending a significant shard of shrapnel directly at the king and killing him instantly. He sought to showcase the awe-inspiring power of his cannon, and in its ultimate act, it provided him with the most personal demonstration possible. Fifth, royal courts are famous for their theatrics, but they are usually less akin to Game of Thrones and more reminiscent of Planet of the Apes. King Alexander of Greece discovered this firsthand during a stroll through the royal gardens. His pet dog got into a scrap with a domesticated macaque. Like any responsible owner, the king intervened to mediate. Unfortunately, this provoked the macaque's partner, who launched a furious counterattack, biting the king multiple times on the leg and torso. The injuries were initially deemed minor, merely a humorous anecdote for dinner conversations. However, the monkey's bite turned out to be far more severe than its bark. The injuries became infected, and the king endured a slow, painful demise. He wasn't toppled by a coup d'etat. Rather, he was the solitary human victim in a short yet fierce civil war among monkeys. Sawu. Few tales encapsulate the essence of being a hormone-driven, thoughtless teenager better than the untimely demise of King Louis III of France. While riding upon his steed, the youthful sovereign spotted a girl he found attractive and decided that the noble course of action was to pursue her at full speed. The frightened girl dashed into her father's home. Louis, with his thoughts solely fixated on the chase and completely oblivious to his surroundings, charged right after her. He entirely forgot to duck under the low-hanging wooden lintel of the doorway. The collision was disastrous, shattering his skull and fracturing his back, killing him instantly. It was a harsh, instantaneous lesson in the laws of physics, and a lasting reminder that even when adorned with a crown, watching where one is going is typically advisable. Bye. Pope Adrian IV was an individual of tremendous power, the sole Englishman to ever ascend to the papacy, a figure who commanded the focus of all Christendom. One might expect his death to be a grand and solemn event. That assumption would be incorrect. According to legend, his demise was precipitated by an adversary almost too small to be noticed. While savoring a goblet of wine, a lone fly acting as either a minuscule agent of chaos or a Protestant saboteur dive-bombed into his drink. The Pope, consumed by holy contemplation, took a sip and accidentally inhaled the insect. It lodged in his windpipe and he choked to death before anyone could administer the papal Heimlich maneuver. The supreme leader of the church, a man capable of excommunicating entire nations, was ultimately defeated by an ordinary housefly, Tom. In the 12th century, the streets of Paris were less a romantic promenade and more a muddy, chaotic mess overflowing with refuse and roaming animals. This medieval urban planning oversight proved fatal for Philip, the young co-king of France. During a royal outing, a common black pig dashed out from a dung pile because dung piles were everywhere, directly into the legs of his horse. The horse stumbled and fell, flinging the young king into the air before he crashed headfirst onto the unyielding cobblestones. The serious head injury proved to be fatal. His promising reign was abruptly ended not by war or poison, but by a pig that neglected to look for oncoming traffic. It was perhaps the most tragically Parisian death imaginable. Qin. Some kings are remembered for their battles, others for their wisdom. Adolf Frederick of Sweden, however, etched his legacy as the monarch who was brutally claimed by a dessert. His final meal wasn't merely a feast, it was a culinary onslaught. After indulging in a massive dinner featuring lobster, caviar, sauerkraut, kippers, and champagne, he wasn't finished. For the grand finale, he consumed 14 servings of his beloved dessert, semla, a sweet bun drenched in hot milk. His digestive system, having endured what could only be likened to a full-scale invasion, surrendered and completely shut down. He died shortly thereafter. This was not a mere case of overeating. This was an intentional act of culinary self-destruction. He faced his sweet, creamy end with a spoon and went down fighting. Muri. Pius of Pyrrhus was among the most brilliant military leaders of ancient times. He was such a formidable figure that his name birthed the term Pyrrhic victory. He faced the Romans to a standstill and was a respected opponent of titans like Alexander the Great. One might expect his end to come from a formidable adversary on an illustrious battlefield. Instead, it arrived in the form of an irate mother armed with a piece of roofing. During a chaotic street clash in the city of Argos, an enemy soldier was poised to strike Pius. The soldier's elderly mother, witnessing from her rooftop, decided to take action. She seized the nearest heavy object, a ceramic roof tile, and hurled it down toward the legendary general's head. It struck him with remarkable precision, knocking him off his horse, and he was swiftly finished off. The great warrior was ultimately vanquished by an act of maternal fury and improvised aerial bombardment. Muri Mot. A king's throne is the ultimate emblem of his authority, stability, and divine right to govern. It serves as his anchor in a tumultuous world. For King Bela I of Hungary, it became his instrument of execution. During a court gathering, as he sat upon his splendid wooden throne, the structure decided that it could no longer endure supporting the monarchy. With a dramatic and fatal crack, the entire structure gave way beneath him, resulting in injuries so catastrophic that the king passed away shortly thereafter. It's a type of irony that is nearly poetic in nature. He wasn't betrayed by a duplicitous advisor or an external foe. Instead, he was let down by his very own furniture. His reign came to a swift and disheartening conclusion, demonstrating that when your time has come, even your own chair may turn against you. 12. Frederick Barbarossa, the Holy Roman Emperor, embodied the essence of a medieval warrior king. A seasoned veteran of numerous battles and a pivotal figure in the Third Crusade, he was a formidable legend known as Redbeard. He commanded a colossal army throughout Europe, seemingly invincible. However, his grand quest concluded in an absurdly anticlimactic fashion, not during a valiant battle, but at a modest river in present-day Turkey. Out of impatience, he opted to traverse the shallow waters on horseback rather than wait. He fell from his mount and, encumbered by his excessively heavy suit of armor, was unable to rise. The legendary crusader who had confronted entire armies met his demise in what can only be described as a puddle. His advanced protective gear transformed into his very own steel coffin. 13. History is replete with accounts of kings meeting their end by assassination, yet the death of Edmund Ironside of England truly sets a new low. Quite literally. Known as Ironside for his exceptional endurance in battles against the Danes, his last moments were anything but valorous. According to one commonly told tale, an assassin discovered the king's singular moment of vulnerability. The assassin concealed himself in the cesspit beneath the royal privy, patiently waiting. When King Edmund took a seat on the toilet for a moment's solace, the assassin thrust a dagger upwards from the depths of the filth, striking the king from the most undignified position imaginable. This narrative illustrates that regardless of your might, a determined adversary can always find a way to confront you at your weakest. 14. Some rulers perish by the sword, while others encounter divine intervention. In the case of Roman Emperor Carus, it was allegedly the latter, with a rather specific and embarrassing detail attached. The official tale narrates that he was struck down by a lightning bolt during a military campaign, a dramatic, godlike conclusion for an emperor. Nevertheless, scandalous rumors that circulated afterward painted a far less grand image. The gossip claimed that the divine bolt happened to strike the emperor's latrine tent at the very moment he was inside using it. We'll never know for certain if it was a direct act of vengeance from Jupiter or simply an extraordinary stroke of bad fortune. But the possibility alone renders this one of history's most outrageous toilet tragedies. It appears that the gods indeed possess a shocking sense of humor. 15. If there were to be a contest for the most disgraceful death in history, Duke Jing of Jin would be a formidable candidate for the gold medal. His demise was prophesied by a seer who asserted that the Duke would not survive to enjoy the new harvest wheat. Enraged, the Duke had the prophet executed and then proceeded to feast on that very wheat to prove him wrong. Yet just as he was about to take a bite, he experienced a sharp pain in his abdomen. He excused himself and hurried to the latrine, which back then was merely a deep pit. In his haste, he slipped, fell into the cesspit, and ultimately succumbed to the filth. Technically, the prophet was correct. He never actually got to eat that wheat. It's a demise so foul and humiliating it borders on impressive. 16. The phrase "dying on the throne" took on a painfully literal significance for King George II of Great Britain. At the age of 76, the king was in his water closet at Kensington Palace attending to his morning routine. According to his valet, who was stationed outside, a loud groan was followed by a heavy thud. The king was discovered dead on the floor. An autopsy later divulged that he had suffered a fatal aortic dissection, a significant tear in the main artery of his heart, likely induced by the physical strain of his morning endeavors. He did not perish in battle or on his deathbed, surrounded by kin. The King of Great Britain and Ireland passed away because he exerted just a tad too much pressure on the toilet, an utterly unglamorous conclusion to a royal reign. 17. We all have someone in our lives who has a bit of a temper. But the Roman Emperor Valentinian I took anger to a dangerously lethal level. During a tense discussion with a delegation of Germanic chieftains, he was infuriated by their brazen and demanding demeanor. His annoyance transformed into an explosive rage that left him with a purple face and bulging veins. He erupted into shouting at the delegates with such volcanic intensity that he caused a blood vessel in his brain to rupture, resulting in a massive and fatal stroke right then and there. He essentially yelled himself to death. The German delegates, who anticipated a tough negotiation, were instead treated to the spectacle of an emperor self-destructing in a fit of fury. It serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes our most formidable adversary is our own rising blood pressure. 18. Qin Huang, the inaugural emperor of a united China, had one obsession that overshadowed all others: the quest for immortality. He squandered vast sums searching for the mythical elixir of life, a magical potion promised to grant him eternal youth. Ironically, his frantic pursuit of everlasting life ultimately led to his demise. His royal alchemists, likely under immense pressure to produce results, offered him a range of supposed immortality potions, which were in truth toxic mixtures containing pure mercury. Convinced that this glistening poisonous liquid was the secret to eluding death, the emperor dutifully consumed it. The outcome was predictably the polar opposite of his desires. He perished from acute mercury poisoning, becoming a quintessential historical example of how the desperate hunt for a miraculous cure can result in a truly foolish death. 19. The passing of King Charles II of Navarre, infamously known as Charles the Bad, was so horrifyingly peculiar that it resembles a tale ripped from a medieval nightmare. In his advanced years, afflicted by a debilitating illness, his doctors recommended a bizarre treatment. He was to be fully wrapped in linen, soaked in brandy, effectively turning him into a human mummy soaked in alcohol. A servant was instructed to tightly bind the fabric around him. After completing her task at night, she found a bit of leftover thread. Rather than cutting it with scissors, she opted to burn it off with her candle. The flame immediately ignited the alcohol-soaked linen, engulfing the king in a blue blaze. He perished in his own bed, a tragic casualty of medieval medicine and a grave error in workplace safety. 20. Jousting tournaments were the extreme sports of the medieval era, typically designed to be non-lethal. For King Henry II of France, what began as a friendly competition turned into a freak accident of monumental proportions. During a celebratory joust, he faced off against the captain of his Scottish Guard. On their final charge, the captain's lance splintered against the king's helmet. A large, jagged fragment of wood flew through the narrow eye slit of his visor, penetrated his eye and drove deep into his brain. He clung to existence for 10 agonizing days before succumbing to the injury. His demise was so specific and unfortunate that it borders on unbelievable. The king, a seasoned warrior, was vanquished not by an enemy's sword, but by a mere sliver of wood, in a sport he had arranged himself. 21. King John of England is largely remembered as a dreadful monarch and for signing the Magna Carta. His death, however, was just as pitiful as his reign. After losing the crown jewels, his entire portable treasury to the encroaching tide in a muddy estuary, he fell into a profound depression. In his sorrow, he sought comfort by indulging in a lavish feast of unripe peaches and sparkling cider. This combination wreaked havoc on his digestive system, resulting in a violent and ultimately fatal case of dysentery. The man who squandered a kingdom's fortune to a bog eventually met his end due to a severe case of food poisoning from a binge of comfort eating. It was an undeniably tragic and undignified exit for one of England's most despised kings. 22. The etiquette of royal courts can be absurdly strict, but for King Philip III of Spain, it proved to be fatal. On a frigid day, the king sat by a blazing fire that became too overwhelming, causing him to overheat. Yet protocol dictated that he could not simply reposition his chair. That task was reserved for a specific courtier, the sommelier de cour. Unfortunately, the designated chair mover could not be located. As courtiers scrambled to find the right person with the proper title, the king was forced to endure the heat. By the time they tracked down the official, the king had overheated to such a degree that he developed a fever and gangrenous sores, leading to his untimely demise. He found himself ensnared by a system so inflexible that it would rather watch its king perish than violate its rigid protocol. Number. The demise of King James I of Scotland serves as a compelling example of how your own clever ideas can unexpectedly turn against you. When a group of assassins stormed his sanctuary, the king frantically searched for a means of escape. He recalled a sewer passage that extended from beneath the floorboards to the outside world. It seemed like the ideal escape route. However, there was just one minor complication. A few days prior, he had commanded the very same tunnel exit to be sealed with stone. Why? Because he was fed up with losing his tennis balls down that very tunnel. Ensnared by his own twisted solution to a trivial sporting annoyance, he was swiftly located by the assassins and met his end. His life could have been spared had it not been for his prior commitment to an unbroken tennis match. Number. Pope John XXI was a man renowned for his intelligence and scholarly achievements, being the only physician ever elected to the papacy. He had a distinct passion for architecture and personally crafted a new study for himself within the papal palace at Verbo. He took immense pride in his creation, envisioning it as the perfect environment for intellectual endeavors. Regrettably, his architectural skills did not match his medical expertise. The ceiling of his freshly built study turned out to be structurally unstable. One day, while he was inside, the roof came crashing down, crushing him beneath the weight of his own ill-fated design. A man meant to heal was ultimately felled by his own dangerously flawed project. Number. The tale of King John of Bohemia presents one of the most perplexing and senseless displays of valor in military history. At the Battle of Creil, he was prepared to lead his knights into the fray. Yet there was a significant issue. He had been entirely blind for a decade. Undeterred by this considerable limitation, he devised a plan that was both mad and brave. He commanded his knights to tether their horses' reins to his own, effectively forming a human cavalry chain with him as the sightless leader. He then ordered them to charge straight into the heart of the English forces. The result was predictable. He and all of his companions were slaughtered. He sought a glorious death in battle, and he certainly found it. However, his final act was akin to a blind man leading a conga line across a vast highway. Number. King Alexander III of Scotland was a man who mockingly faced destiny, and destiny did not take kindly to it. On the day of a royal council meeting, a soothsayer publicly warned him of an impending catastrophic storm that would strike the following day, bringing devastation. The king, a noted skeptic, dismissed the warning with contempt. That evening, despite the raging tempest outside, he felt compelled to ride out to be with his young wife. Ignoring the earnest warnings of his nobles, he set out into the storm. Somewhere along the dark and hazardous coastal route, his horse stumbled and both rider and mount plunged over a cliff to their untimely deaths. The prophecy came to fruition in the most direct and ironic manner possible. He didn't simply overlook a caution. He charged headfirst into it for a midnight rendezvous. Number. Draco, the inaugural legislator of ancient Athens, was infamous for his exceedingly harsh laws, where even minor infractions warranted the death penalty. His name literally birthed the term draconian. One might presume such a severe individual would meet a grave fate. Instead, he was slain by an overwhelming display of public adoration. After delivering a speech in a theater, the citizens were so elated with him that they honored him in the traditional Athenian manner by tossing their hats and cloaks at him. The excitement was so overwhelming that he soon found himself buried beneath a mountain of garments. Unable to liberate himself from the sheer weight of their admiration and reverence, he suffocated and died. The man who authored the manual on capital punishment ultimately perished as a casualty of a deadly fashion avalanche. Number. A splendid fireworks display can captivate and delight the many, yet a poorly executed one can prove fatal, as Archduke Leopold of Austria sadly learned. To commemorate his sister-in-law's visit, the Archduke took it upon himself to personally oversee a magnificent pyrotechnic show. He amassed an impressive collection of gunpowder and combustible materials to craft his grand creation. Regrettably, his eagerness severely outpaced his skill in managing explosives. A stray spark set off the entire cache simultaneously, resulting in a tremendous, uncontrollable blast that enveloped the Archduke in flames. He suffered such severe burns that he succumbed days later in agonizing torment. His quest for an extravagant celebration transformed into his own tragic and public self-immolation. It was a brief, spectacular, and exceptionally reckless stint as a pyrotechnician. The story of Gore Demo, a French nobleman, serves as a timeless cautionary tale about the deadly repercussions of greed. When flames erupted in his castle, chaos broke out, and everyone scrambled to escape. Everyone, that is, except for Gore. He refused to abandon the burning structure without his most cherished possession, a hefty chest brimming with treasures. While his family and servants fled to safety, he desperately struggled to rescue his material wealth from the inferno. As he exerted himself to lift the impossibly heavy box, the fiery floor beneath him collapsed, and he fell into the blaze beneath, clutching his beloved gold. He treasured his riches more than his own life, and ultimately he lost both, becoming a perfectly charred and exceedingly wealthy corpse. Emperor Maximilian II possessed peculiar tastes, especially regarding his meals. He harbored an almost obsessive fascination with exotic fruits, particularly melons. While a passion for fruits is typically nutritious, Maximilian took it to an absurd level. For extended periods, his diet was predominantly composed of melons and cucumbers, accompanied by excessive quantities of wine. His doctors continually cautioned him that this strange liquid-heavy regimen was placing tremendous pressure on his kidneys. But the emperor remained obstinate. Unsurprisingly, he eventually perished from kidney failure. He was not poisoned by an adversary or felled in combat. He was undone by his own unrelenting watery diet. He effectively drowned his internal organs one slice of melon at a time. Most monarchs must be alert to assassins, political adversaries, or invading forces. King Charles II of France, however, should have been more cautious about his own pets. He had a cherished parrot, a creature he adored and kept close. One day, for reasons known solely to the bird, the parrot bit him on his hand. The injury appeared trivial, a mere nip from a pampered companion. Yet this was an era devoid of antibiotics. The apparently minor bite became infected. The infection spread until gangrene took hold. The formidable king who had guided France through the concluding stages of the 100 Years' War alongside Joan of Arc was ultimately claimed by bacteria introduced into his system by his sulky pet bird. It was a slow, agonizing, and entirely preventable demise. King Christian II of Denmark was infamous for his severe mental instability. Living in a perpetual state of paranoia and anxiety, his fragile psyche finally fractured during the Napoleonic Wars. When a fleet of Spanish vessels, allies of Denmark at the time, entered the harbor, the king was not made aware of their friendly intent. Observing the foreign warships, he immediately assumed it was a hostile invasion. The sheer dread of this imagined assault sent him into a panic so profound that it induced a lethal stroke. The ruler of a nation passed away not from a genuine threat but from an illusion conjured by his own mind. He was literally scared to death by those he considered allies. When you're condemned to death by your own sibling, usually, you don't have the luxury of selecting your execution method. But George Plantagenet, the Duke of Clarence, was seemingly an exception. Accused of treason against his brother King Edward IV of England, legend has it he was offered a choice. Being a notorious drunkard with a particular affection for sweet mousy wine, his purported request was as singular as it was appropriate. According to the popular narrative immortalized by Shakespeare, he asked to be submerged in a gigantic barrel of his favorite beverage. While historians discuss the literal accuracy of this account, the widespread belief in it speaks volumes regarding his legacy. Whether it was a final act of defiant indulgence or merely a dark jest, the Duke of Clarence is remembered as the man who may have quite literally pickled himself to his demise. And that concludes our official roundup of history's most unfortunate royal departures. However, here's the twist. History is overflowing with foolishness, and it's impossible for us to uncover every single case. So, what's the one incredibly foolish royal death we completely overlooked that should have made our list? Illuminate our ignorance in the comments section below. As you educate us, be sure to like this video and subscribe to ensure you don't miss our next dive into historical insanity. Share this video with your favorite history enthusiast. We appreciate your viewership, and we'll catch you in the next one.